we're privileged to have Laura Simon from Bethany, Connecticut come down to talk to us about coyotes and issues that people might have with them, especially with what's going on in the past couple of days here in Haddam. And this is not the Ellen DeGeneres show, but this is as close as Haddam can get. And she's got a master's degree from Yale in wildlife management. And thank you again for coming, and take it away.
Okay, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here to talk to you all and to see some familiar faces, Pat and Les Young. Just to give you a little background, I did graduate work at the Yale School of Forestry, and I focused on environmental issues and particularly in wildlife issues. I spent about 18 years running a wildlife hotline to help the public resolve problems with wildlife. So if you have questions about coyotes or any other wildlife issue that's going on for you, feel free to ask me. I'm fair game. But my specialty is looking at the kinds of issues that develop with people in sort of urban and suburbanized areas, and we have a lot of different kinds of wildlife issues that develop. Lindsay White-Dasher, who is our resident coyote expert in Maryland at our headquarters, couldn't come, so I'm in her stead, so I will do my very best. But I'll try and help you resolve any issues or concerns you might have with coyotes. Feel free to shout out any questions you might have as we go along. And hopefully I'll give you enough tools at the end of this presentation that you'll feel more comfortable dealing with any coyote concerns you might have and any other wildlife concerns. So, okay, let's begin with people have many different views of the coyote. I mean, I think most of us grew up with Wile E. Coyote and on the cartoons, and but people have a lot of concerns about them, and even Mark Twain didn't particularly care for coyotes. He described the coyote as a long, slim, sick, and sorry-looking skeleton that is a living, breathing allegory of want. He is always hungry. So, you know, yeah, I guess. But what we're seeing with coyotes is they really have not been here forever. In the past 100 years, they have expanded their range tremendously. They were once sort of in the middle part of our country, and then they had this great expansion because they are so adaptable. They can thrive in almost any kind of landscape. So now, as you can see, they once lived in sort of a small part of our country, and now they're pretty much everywhere. That has led to increased interactions between coyotes and people, and many people are seeing coyotes in their neighborhoods for the very first time. And it's no surprise that has led to concerns. Now, this is the Portland light rail at Portland, Washington, just going about from the airport back and forth, and lo and behold, they found a coyote taking a ride somewhere new and different. But coyotes are very opportunistic, clearly, and this one even learned how to ride the public transportation system.
Did you buy a ticket?
He did not buy a ticket. Freeloader. People have a lot of fear and concerns about coyotes, and we're getting calls at the Humane Society of the U.S. from everywhere. Coyotes killing small dogs and cats, people not knowing what to do about their coyote problem, and there's a lot of fervor developing. And when cats go missing, if there's a coyote in the area, the coyote gets blamed. Whether or not that coyote had anything to do with that cat doesn't matter. People see a coyote or hear about one, and then their cat goes missing, and that coyote is the villain. Here's a call to 911 here in Connecticut. We're trapped in our house. I am so scared. There's a vicious coyote outside. You've got to send someone now to get this thing out of here. This is typical. This is what the police stations get, 911 gets. People are scared. They see a coyote, and there's a lot of fear associated with that. What we try and tease out are, what are the problematic sightings? You know, where is the coyote being a true problem, or is it just a fear-based issue? And if so, we need to educate that person and try and get them out of this scared frame of mind. And let them know what the coyote is really doing. There was an incident in Bethany, Connecticut, where I'm from. I don't know if any of you heard of it, but a woman was attacked by a coyote. And the weird part was she was attacked 1 mile from our house. And the police officer in charge called me and said, oh my God, we've had this coyote attack. And it was weird. because he called me back, he said, this is strange. He said, this woman, she was jogging along the road, and it was getting dark, and this coyote attacked her. He said, the only odd part of it is, he said, I'm at the hospital now, and he said, the doctors are telling me that her injuries are not consistent with bites from a coyote. He said they're actually consistent with attack by a pricker bush. And what it turned out to be in this case is a woman was jogging, she turned, she thought she saw a coyote, it may have been a dog because there is a dog at the farmhouse on Route 69 that looks just like a coyote. She was scared, she was so scared she ran off the road, bam, into a pricker bush, and she assumed that her injuries and pain were from the coyote. But it turns out there was no coyote involvement whatsoever. Yet, the newspapers and TV covered it as a vicious Connecticut woman attacked by a coyote. Look at that face.
Yeah, they always have those pictures where
Yeah.
like their teeth show.
Where their teeth are
Yeah.
bared.
Yeah.
This turned out to be a non-attack by a coyote. And when we called the newspapers and TV stations to tell them that, they had no interest in doing a follow-up story. This was really exciting and newsworthy, but the fact that she had an altercation with a pricker bush was not. So solving problems with coyotes, I'm going to go over coyote ecology and behavior, why are there coyotes in Haddam, and a bit about solving conflicts, how we change coyote behavior and our own behavior to achieve that goal. And I'm going to give you a lot of tips for coexisting, which is the main point of this presentation. So to start with coyote ecology and behavior, how do you recognize a coyote? Well, the average coyote is about 25 to 35 pounds. They have pointed ears, but a telltale sign of a coyote is these beautiful yellow eyes that kind of glow. They're gorgeous. So you don't tend to see those in a dog. They have a long, slender muzzle and a black tipped tail which they hold downward. Unlike a red fox, which they're sometimes confused with, which has a white tipped tail and is a lot smaller. But people confuse coyotes with domestic dogs. If you look here, these dogs, particularly German Shepherds, and the one on the right looks a lot like a coyote. If he wasn't wearing a collar, I would guarantee you people would mistake that animal for a coyote. So sometimes dogs running free like this, these mixes or breeds can be confused with coyotes. It's a
And
terrible
I
picture.
also think people mistake gray fox for
Yeah.
coyote.
Gray foxes can look a lot
Yeah.
like coyotes. They're smaller, but if you don't know that, you'll
They
confuse
kind of
them.
overlap there.
They
Yeah.
definitely, and they overlap territories. Coyote scat, poop, feces, is filled with hair and bones. It's different from dog scat, which is very soft because of the dog food that we feed our dogs. Coyote tracks are very similar to dog tracks. However, with coyote tracks, you can see the claw marks. With dogs, you don't tend to see the claw marks because we trim their claws. But with coyotes, you can see the claw marks, but usually only the 3 middle toes. And coyotes tend to travel in a straight line when they go. Dogs tend to zoom all over. You know, I smell something good here, something good here, something good here. So those are some of the differences. Coyotes produce a variety of sounds. They howl, they bark, they whine, they yip. People often say to us, the reason they're doing this, isn't it to celebrate a kill? When they hear the coyotes start howling and they think it's a kill. But coyotes don't howl to celebrate a kill. It makes no sense. If they've killed something, they don't want to advertise to the whole great world, I've just killed something, there's meat here. They want to keep it secret, so they don't celebrate the kill. But what they do is they howl to communicate with their family members and pups. A lot of their communication we don't understand. They howl to defend their territory, to let other coyotes know, I'm here, this is mine, stay out. And they also howl at ambulances and police sirens, just like your dogs. And we have no idea why they do it, but they do. They're originally native to the grasslands of North America, as you saw from that first slide of where they came from. So they have really long legs for running and jumping on prey. They're very adapted for running. They are the 3rd fastest land mammal in North America. Any idea what the first 2 fastest land mammals are? Any guesses?
Panther?
Panther? That's a good guess? No?
Leopard.
Leopards.
Leopards? No, in North America.
Oh, that's right.
North America we're talking.
Antelopes?
What's that?
Antelopes?
What kind?
pronghorn maybe?
Very good. Pronghorn antelope is the first fastest land mammal. What's the second in North America? Come on, you guys. Second.
Mountain lion.
Very good. Have you seen this presentation? Okay. Yes, mountain lion is the second fastest. Coyotes are very intelligent and adaptable. The fact that they are so intelligent makes it possible for us to teach them what to do and not to do, which is why we can work with coyotes only because they're so intelligent, and we can communicate with them and change their behavior. They're very flexible in their habitat requirements. They can exist almost anywhere. They're very opportunistic feeders. Their diet is very varied. And here are some of their diet items. If you look, small rodents comprise 42% of their diet. Fruit, surprisingly, is almost a quarter of their diet, and grass, even 6%. So they eat a lot of different things you wouldn't think. As you see here, even invertebrates, 4%. They're really opportunistic. They eat whatever comes along. But what's most surprising in a study done in Chicago, in Cook County, where they looked at coyote diet, they found that human-associated foods were only 2% of their diet, and cats were only 1%, which was surprising because people are very concerned about coyotes picking off cats, and they certainly do sometimes pick off cats. But that cats were such a teeny percent of their diet really showed that coyotes make an honest living, even in suburban, urban areas when they can take advantage of things that are close to our lifestyles and homes. So there are two types of coyotes that you need to know about. One is resident coyotes. They live in family groups, and they tend to stay around. And then there are transient coyotes. These are solitary animals that are in motion. Resident coyotes live in groups of 5 to 6 adults, plus the pups from the past year. They defend their territories from other coyotes, and they usually have a small home range. They defend it, they stay there, that's where they live. Transient coyotes often have larger home ranges. They're looking to establish territories, and when coyotes are moved out of certain areas, they're looking to move right in. So they're kind of on the go. They're trying to establish a territory, and they don't know where they're going to end up next.
What would you say constitutes a small range?
A small range is about 2 square miles, roughly. Studies show that coyotes can live in very urbanized areas. This is Cook County in Chicago, where they have intensively studied coyotes. The yellow polygrams are the resident coyote home ranges. You can see they're pretty small, and they're very fixed. The white polygrams are the transient coyote home ranges, which are much bigger. And what was interesting about this study when they started it, they have a lot of green space in Cook County. And they figured, okay, we've got about 3,000 to 5,000 coyotes living here in the greater Chicago area. They assumed that the coyotes would be living in the green space, the open space. But what they found was, yes, the coyotes were very active there, but they also moved through the residential areas a lot more than was ever expected. As you can see, particularly the transient coyotes kind of were all over the place. Mating season occurs December to March. Coyotes are monogamous. They stay together for life. And one of the prime coyote researchers, Dr. Stan Gertz, said, "I've never seen a case of divorce in coyotes." They pick a mate, and that's it. Both males and females help to raise the pups. And interestingly, they have the ability to adjust the size of their litters based on how much food they have and what the population density is. It's amazing. There are a lot of coyotes, they have smaller litters. When coyotes are trapped out or shot, their litter size doubles. If there's a lot of food, they have huge litters, and we're talking 7 to 13 pups. A lot of pups. So at this time, there are conflicts. Off-leash larger dogs may be more vulnerable because coyotes are very territorial, and they may see these dogs as a threat. So this is when you tend to have altercations between coyotes and larger dogs, December to March. And the reason is the coyotes are just saying, this is my territory, I'm mating, I'm trying to find a mate, and you're in my way. Get out. The pup rearing season is April to August. The litter size is usually 4 to 7 pups. It can go as high as 12 to 14 if there aren't many coyotes, but usually it's 4 to 7. The pups stay in and around the den about 6 weeks. Now, this is a key time. The pups are around, and at about 4 weeks old, they come out and they're playing around the den, and people tend to see them, usually in midsummer. There's coyotes, they're running around, there's no parents. Oh my God, what do we do? Coyotes only have a den for raising young. People tend to think if they're here in my backyard, they're here forever. No, they den to raise their pups, and then they vacate that den. The female coyote will often have multiple denning sites, and if something happens, if one den site isn't good or she feels threatened, she'll move them. By the end of the summer, the pups are beginning to hunt on their own. They're not on their own, they're just starting to get the skill to hunt, and they'll start to be more secretive. So conflicts at this time, there's 3 main areas of conflict, April to August. One is small dogs may be seen as prey. You've got 2 coyotes, they may have 4 to 7, even 12 pups, and they're hungry. So yeah, if your little dog is running around unsupervised, to them, what's the difference between that dog and a woodchuck or squirrel? To them, that's a prey item, and they might go after that little dog. So this is a key time to be sure to supervise your dogs. There's a lot of activity at the den site. The pups may be left behind when the parents go out hunting, and people often call us and say, these pups are orphaned. How do you know they're orphaned? Well, they're running around playing, but no parents are around. And what I tell them is, if the pups are acting sickly and weak, we'd be concerned. But if they're playing and having fun, that just means they're too young to go out hunting with the parents. They're being left behind and they're bored. So they're just playing and running around and trying to have a good time. Nothing to worry about. That's going to go on for a couple weeks, and then suddenly, when the parents decide they're old enough to go hunting, they will disappear. So we tell people, just don't worry about it. Just let them be. But around den sites, sometimes the coyote parents are a little defensive. So if dogs come around a den site, they may go after them. Or if people are walking dogs, sometimes we have coyotes following people, just kind of trying to check out what they're doing. You're near my den, I want to see what you're up to. So we get a lot of reports about coyotes following people around dens at this time. And there's den protection. The coyotes' parents are just being good parents. They're just making sure the coast is clear and their pups are safe. September to December is dispersal season. This is when the yearling coyotes leave the family group. They become transient. They're looking for a place of their own. We don't have a lot of conflicts around this time, but if there's outdoor pet food and garbage, it might be enticing to these younger coyotes because they're not really experienced with hunting, so they're going to go for easy food sources. So this is a time to be especially careful not to leave out garbage or pet food or anything that might attract them. But they're on the move, and you're going to see them. And you're seeing them now. And I know you had a sighting in the town of a couple coyotes. They could easily be transients, just coming through, looking for a place of their own, and they're going to keep moving. So they should not be a problem. Okay, how many of you have seen this picture? Any hands who have seen this picture or know this story? Anybody? This is was in newspaper headlines all over the country. A coyote jumped into a cooler in the greater Chicago area. What happened was it was a Quiznos sandwich shop. It was a really hot spring day. They opened the door. It was so hot. And a coyote came wandering along, came in the door, tried to jump over the counter, instead went to the Snapples cooler, and it was nice and cool, and he jumped in and just hung out. He was totally happy. He was cooling off. Well, people were surprised. He was eating lunch there, but they didn't. They stayed. And finally, animal control was called, and they came, and they removed the coyote, who did not want to leave this cooler. It was very nice there. And people were like, is it a sick coyote? It was a very healthy young coyote who was just way too hot and found a good place to cool off. But the interesting thing that happened was that so many people reacted to this like, where did this coyote come from? Oh my God, we know. Did somebody drop him off? Was he a pet? And you know, this was one of the thousands of coyotes in Chicago that people didn't know existed there. The traffic cameras at crossings at night showed so many coyotes using the roadways, but because they're so secretive normally, people didn't even know they existed in their Chicago neighborhoods. So it just underscored they live in all landscape types. They can live close to people and people never know they're there. They can live in heavily urbanized areas. They come out at night. People just don't see them. And within their home range, they show a preference for natural habitats. They tend to stay away from areas of a lot of human activity. They really do normally go out of their way to avoid people. In terms of mortality and disease, most die in the wild before they're 3. They can live up to 13 or 15 years in captivity, but automobiles are the biggest killer of coyotes. And in this one study in Cook County, 50 to 70% were killed by cars. Rabies is pretty rare. We do have some cases of rabies in coyotes, and they'll act like any other rabid animal. They'll circle, they'll fall down, their locomotion is impaired. They look drunk, they don't look right. Mange is a big cause of death. And if you see mange, it's caused by this little horrible mite that goes under the skin and just, you know, they lose their fur and they itch like mad. It's like mosquitoes biting you night and day, and they become very impaired and very compromised when they're mange inflicted. And this is a big problem. The mange mites are everywhere. So this is one of the biggest sources of death. Why are there coyotes in Haddam? Well, a number of reasons. There's a lot of great habitat and space here, lots of food, mice and rats, free rodent control they're doing for the community. There's a lot of small mammals, squirrels, rabbits. They love Canada goose eggs. Lots of them. People complain about Canada geese. They're doing their part. And they really help to balance the ecosystem. They're one major predator here. And there's little competition because they are a top predator. So Haddam is perfect. As I drove through getting here tonight, I saw this is just ideal habitat. It's edge habitat. There's lots of landscaping. There's lots of cover and forest patches. This is perfect for coyotes. And there's a lot of attractants. People leave pet food outside and water, not realizing it's attracting animals they don't want. They don't always secure the garbage cans properly, so they can get into garbage. Messy bird feeders. I always recommend putting sunflower seed kernels in your bird feeders rather than the whole sunflower seed, because the birds just drop a lot more of the sunflower seeds, but the kernels they tend to eat, so there's less mess. If you have fruit trees, fruit left on the ground will attract them. Vegetable gardens attract them, compost piles. And if you let your little small animals free roam, that's attractive. And intentional feeding. I mean, there are a lot of people that will feed animals. And I heard, you know, there's somebody who's feeding turkey buzzards and putting out carcasses, which is very nice for the turkey buzzards, but it will also bring in coyotes and other animals. So you've got to be careful what you put out for animals because it will attract other animals like coyotes. And intentional feeding is a huge one. People see a coyote, put out food, and they train that animal to come for food. Here's, do you remember this one? In 2006, Branford, a woman was attacked by a coyote at a roadside McDonald's. And she stopped there and got something, and the coyote came right up and just bit her behind the knee. But the interesting thing there, even though she got her rabies shots, was that they interviewed the McDonald's staff, and they said, have you guys seen this coyote? And at first everybody said, no, 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 no. And then they interviewed them more, and they said, well, yeah, we've seen the coyote. And then they interviewed them more, and they found out that the staff had been feeding this coyote. And they'd been feeding him a lot of French fries and burgers. So basically, this animal was trained to come to people for food and had become so habituated to people that when this woman came, he must have thought she's a source of food, and he just nipped her to say, gimme, you know. But this is a big problem, and most of the problems we have with coyotes are perching people and biting them or having a direct contact with them are because of intentional or unintentional feeding. Usually it's intentional, but people don't like to fess up. So coyote sightings, what does that mean? Well, we know coyotes are naturally diurnal. You should see them during the day. I know people feel that if you see a coyote during the day, it means that it's rabid. No, you should see them during the day. That's when they're active. That's when their food is out. That's when rabbits and squirrels and mice are active. And that's when coyotes are active. They do naturally avoid people unless we change that by teaching them to come to us. Most of them are never seen by people, even though they live nearby. And so seeing them out hunting during the day is no cause for concern, even though people are usually frightened when they see this. The problem stems from coyotes living in close proximity to people. They can become habituated, meaning they lose their fear. And that is a problem, and we need to reverse that. Coyotes become habituated when they learn that people and neighborhoods are a source of food. Again, the pet food and all the food sources we leave outside, bring them close to us. Habituation is a learned behavior. We reinforce it by not reacting properly when we see a coyote. So I'll go into more of what that means to react properly when we go into preventing coyote conflicts. Okay, will coyotes attack pets? I know a number of us who have seen coyotes. What do? What's the first thing you do when you see a coyote?
Scoop up the pets.
What's that?
Scoop up the pets.
Scoop up the pets, but what else do you do? I do something that I will guiltily admit. What do?
Take its picture.
Take its picture. We grab our camera, we run to take its picture because it is so exciting to see that animal. The problem is that because we do that, coyotes are not learning that they shouldn't be in our backyards near our homes. We're taking pictures. That's not scary to them. That's actually quite welcoming. You know, we're not doing anything to tell them, don't come close. So they normally hunt small rodents, but a little dog and cats and other small animals, how should they know the difference? They know these are moving, living targets. They're small. Why not? You know, they can't distinguish domestic animals from what they are supposed to be preying upon. Unattended pets, particularly small dogs and cats, are at risk of attack because they're similar to the normal prey items of a coyote. The larger breed dogs are at higher risk, but pretty much only at coyote breeding season, where coyotes might view them as a threat during this time. But the little animals are more of a prey item, and that's why they definitely need to be attended to. So proper pet care is really vital. We tell people you must attend your pets when they're outdoors. Use short leashes when walking your pets. Keep them inside at night. Don't let them just roam free. Don't allow a coyote to come between you and a pet, and don't allow your dogs to play with coyotes. I mean, people go, what are you talking about? That's so stupid. Of course we wouldn't let our dogs play with coyotes. But we have gone around into communities where there are problems, and you would not believe how many people think it's cute and fun to let their coyotes play, let their dogs play with coyotes. And we had one really bad situation in California, in a very wealthy community, where the woman said that her dogs grew up playing with the coyotes. And yet, you know, it became a problem because the coyotes would approach other dogs in the community, and we couldn't convince her she must not let her dogs free roam and play with these animals. It just creates bad behaviors. For small dogs, it's very important to accompany them outdoors. Always use a leash, and pick up your dog. If you see a coyote nearby, just pick up the dog. With larger dogs, the big time you need to be aware of is January to March, the breeding season. And use a leash, and again, don't allow your dog to play with a coyote. With cats, the only way to ensure cat safety really is to keep them indoors. I know people don't want to do this, but you know, when cats are left outdoors, they encounter all kinds of wildlife and can get into all kinds of scraps. And you know, some cat owners have now started using a leash and a harness, and they say their cats kind of enjoy it. My favorite is these sort of cat enclosures that you can pre-purchase. They just fold out, there's no work, and the cat can enjoy the outdoors but stay safe. The other issue, I'm also a wildlife rehabilitator, as I know Pat and Les Young are, and one of the big issues for us is cats absolutely devastate thousands of wild animals every year, baby bunnies and birds. And so when you let your cat free roam, they have this tremendous harmful impact on wildlife. So for that reason alone, we beg you to not let your cats free roam. Here's one of my favorites, is a catio. It's a cat patio. A lot of companies sell them. They fold out and your cat can enjoy the outdoors, but they're in a protected space. So they can stay outside but be safe and not do any harm. So really, the other thing we tell people, if you've got outdoor cats, you've got to pick up the pet food immediately after feeding them. Keep them inside at night. And some people have created these cat posts to give cats protection, that cats can jump up to these posts that coyotes can't jump up to. And if they're outdoors, that will afford them some protection. But again, best protection, never leave your pets unattended. If you've got fences must be at least 6 feet tall. Coyotes can get over a 6-foot tall fence, but they're not wanting to. They're kind of lazy. You know, if a fence poses sort of a lot of energy to get over, they're just not going to do it. They're not jumpers, they're scramblers. What they do, they scramble over a fence. So more importantly, they'll see a barrier and they'll say, okay, 6 feet tall or 5 feet tall. I'm not going to bother, but they'll try and get under it. So you want to reinforce the bottom with hardware cloth. Some people trench it, but we found it just as easy to take hardware cloth, run it parallel to the ground for a couple feet, and secure it with landscaping staples, and that will prevent coyotes from being able to dig under. We also recommend removing any thick brush near homes and removing, of course, anything that might be attracting the coyotes. And for example, imagine this homeowner, you know, they live here and it's 6 in the morning and they let their dog out. They've got a 4-foot chain link fence. It's hard to see, but it's right here. They let their dog out and then they go back in the house for a cup of coffee. And they've been doing that every day for a couple of years. And then one day, all of a sudden they look out and there's a coyote and he grabs their dog and runs off, their little Bichon, and they're horrified. And the problem is, all this brush has created a great sort of coyote roadway. The coyotes can traverse back and forth between different yards. It's perfect, they've got a lot of cover. And the person may feel like, out of the blue, the coyote appeared, it's been several years, and took the dog away. How dare the coyote do that? But we can assure you that this attack was in the making for a long time. The coyote was probably in this brushy area watching, and the coyote knew the person's behavior and that every morning that little dog was let out at 6 a.m. So this was an attack that was well planned. And the problem here is all this brush that affords so much cover for a coyote. Here's another yard in the same neighborhood. They've got a 4-foot chain link fence, but as you can see, they've cleared out most of the brush. So a coyote can't lurk here. A coyote can't plan an attack and probably isn't going to bother this dog because it's too much work and they're too exposed. So we tell people, you know, you don't have to remove all the undergrowth and brush, but because exposed areas, coyotes won't lurk in and plan any sort of dog attack. Here's something some people have done. If they've got a fence, they can put this this mesh. I don't know why this is coming out sort of reversed. The image I'm seeing is not the same, but is what you're seeing. But usually, if you've got a mesh topper that kind of goes out this way, a coyote will not try and jump. He can't scramble over it. I don't know why this is reversed, but anyway, that will prevent him from trying to get over this kind of fence. There is a product that is devised just for keeping coyotes out. It's called the Coyote Roller, and what it is, it's a PVC pipe-like device that you put on top of a fence. And what happens, the coyote tries to scramble over, and this device just rolls him right off. It's a great way to keep your dog in and the coyote out. And it's a bit expensive, but we tell people you can kind of make something like that. As long as the PVC pipe can roll very easily, it will prevent a coyote from being able to scramble over and your dog from getting out. So this is a solution for a lot of people that fencing in their backyards. People always ask, do coyotes attack people? That's a big concern. And surprisingly, coyote attacks on people are really, really rare. We have on average under 10 bites a year across the country. You can compare this to 4.7 million dog bites are reported by emergency rooms and doctors around the country. So being attacked by a coyote is a very rare event as opposed to dog issues. Most of the coyote attacks involve minor injuries. Many were related to feeding or some sort of pet related. Some kind of food was involved. You're more likely to be killed by a champagne cork. 24 people die a year of that. Or a golf ball. 100 people a year die from a golf ball than being attacked by a coyote. So, just try to put it in perspective. Your risk from coyotes is extremely low. There goes your champagne cork. For children, we try to really educate them, and there are certain things they need to know. Never leave a small child unattended outside. That's, of course, a given. If you see a coyote near a child, pick up the small child and teach children safety around strange dogs, and really not just coyotes, but animals, dogs in particular. If there are that many dog bites, they need to be informed. There's a program called Be Smart, S-M-A-R-T, which is stop, don't make any sudden moves, make yourself look big, announce yourself by making noise, and retreat by backing away slowly, never run. Why not run?
It'll run right in.
Right, it triggers the prey pursuit instinct. You never want to run from a coyote or a dog or any animal, a bear, anything, because that triggers their instinct to chase you. And children should always tell an adult. And these things really help, but the most important, I think, is the never run. Because a kid's instinct, actually all of our instincts are, oh my gosh, there's a bear, there's a coyote, there's a wolf, run. And that's the worst thing you can do. If you're big and mean, they have to think, is it worth it? And for an animal like a coyote that wants to prey on small rodents like mice and chipmunks, if you're looking big and mean, they're going to think, not worth my time to have an altercation with this person. The other thing to know too is even when coyotes go after small dogs, people tend to assume that means their child is at risk. But coyotes view small dogs as a little prey item. People, children are way too big to be considered prey. They're not looking at us as prey. There is no association between a coyote that goes after a little dog and a coyote that might pose a risk to people. The two are just completely different. So in terms of solutions for coyote conflicts, we have a number of them. To address them, we must change the coyote's behavior. That is the given. We've got to change their behavior to solve problems, and we have to change our behavior because our behaviors actually create so many of the problems. It's pretty straightforward. We need to make lifestyle changes. We talked about some of these, eliminating what's attracting coyotes, stop feeding wildlife and bringing them in. We need to take precautions with our pets and teach children what to do if they might encounter a coyote or a strange animal. But the bigger issue, and it's less straightforward, how do we address problematic coyote behavior? Originally and traditionally, the big issue was you remove, you trap like mad, you kill them, you relocate them. These were some of the solutions that were considered acceptable but aren't any longer. The newer solution is to haze coyotes, and I'm going to talk more about how to do that because that really does help stop problems. I want to explain why some of the traditional solutions don't work. Relocation doesn't work for a number of reasons. The Cook County, Chicago area project monitored 12 relocated coyotes. What they found was that none of them remained at the release site. They were all gone. They beelined out of there. They all traveled towards their original home range. None of them returned back home successfully. They were killed by hunters, by cars, or by disputes with other coyotes. Relocation really doesn't work. The state doesn't want people relocating. And when you relocate some coyotes, other coyotes fill that same niche. So you're really not solving the problem. Killing doesn't work for a good reason. You tend to have here's what you tend to have, is sort of a stable pack or a stable group. And in that stable group, only the alpha female and male reproduce. And they may have 3, 5, 7 pups. But when you come in and you kill some of the coyotes, and maybe you'll take out some of an alpha male or female and some of the other pups, what ends up happening, you disrupt the pair bonds and other pair bonds form, and new coyotes, transient coyotes, come in, and suddenly you have all these new groupings and new pair bonds, and you have all these new pups, because coyotes, once they're disrupted, their litter size increases, they tend to reproduce at a younger age, so suddenly you've started with just the 2 alpha male and female reproducing, and you end up with 3 pairs reproducing, and you end up with a lot more coyotes. So disrupting that pack or that social group actually has unintended and bad consequences, exactly the opposite of what you want.
And I believe that past chart was on one of your handouts.
Yes, thank you, Jack. Yeah, well, that chart is on one of the handouts, so you can learn more about it. The other problem with lethal removal, all the habitat requirements are still available, so the new transient coyotes move in to this empty habitat. Coyote litters are really density dependent, meaning if there's a lot of coyotes, they have less pups. If there's fewer, they have more. So when you go in and trap or kill them, you suddenly end up with the pairs that do reproduce having huge litters, sometimes double or triple what they would have had. So the communities that do this kind of trapping or killing end up seeing an overall increase in the size of the coyote population. And that can lead to an endless cycle of killing, because they say, oh my gosh, we still have so many coyotes, and they keep hiring trappers to kill them, and the cycle doesn't end. In Colorado, there was a study of this, a 7-year study, where they radio collared 92 coyotes and tracked them. And they set up a removal area where they removed a lot of coyotes, and then they had a control area where they didn't remove them at all. And in the removal area, they took out up to 75% of the coyotes, and fascinatingly, they found that the population size was back to the pre-removal numbers in only 8 months. That quickly, less than a year, the population bounced back. The litter size doubled, and the sex ratio favored females after removal, meaning that more females were born, which meant more animals that would have pups. And the yearlings reproduced in the removal area, but not in the control area. So they showed that coyotes were having pups at a younger age in the areas where they removed some. But in the control area, they didn't have pups at a younger age. So it really doesn't work to kill them, they bring the numbers down, and they bounce back with a vengeance. Another problem with killing coyotes is it's very hard to catch the problem coyote. There are some people who, if there is a problem coyote, and sometimes there is in a community, a coyote that just starts developing a taste for small dogs and just, really is persistent. But how do you catch that particular animal? If there are a lot of coyotes in the area, you can set traps and you'll catch a lot of other ones. It can be very time-consuming and expensive to try and get out that one problem animal. And most importantly, when you trap animals, you don't address the root cause of the conflicts. You're not eliminating what's attracting them in the first place. And when you trap, you're still having habituated coyotes that are coming in and finding food and getting used to living with people. And you're not teaching local residents how to coexist with them. And you're not teaching coyotes acceptable behavior. You need to teach them in a way that they can learn how to stay away, and we're going to talk about that next. If a coyote is killed, for example, the other members of the social group don't know why. If a coyote disappears, you're not teaching them anything. The coyote is removed, and so they're not learning to stay away when others are killed. Hazing is really a wonderful and very new method to teach coyotes how to stay out of areas they're not wanted. It employs the immediate use of deterrence to move an animal out of an area you don't want them, or to discourage undesirable behavior. And it is relatively new. It's being studied. It's a hard thing to study because you have to get to the coyotes exactly when they're causing a problem, and do something that changes their behavior. So researchers are having some issues studying it, but what it involves is using various techniques to reinstill their natural fear of humans, and teach the habituated coyotes to get fearful again. There are a number of techniques: yelling and waving your arms, banging pots and pans, blowing a whistle, air horn, using squirt guns, throwing things. And what they found is that a coyote will learn, oh my gosh, this is a place to avoid, and they will pass on that information to their family members and pups. So I think we are going to have a seasoned coyote hazer with us who is going to demonstrate. You want to come to the front so people can see you? Going to demonstrate how to haze a coyote.
Alright, so the first thing you can use to be loud is a penny shaker.
You can put pennies in any sort of metal container.
And then, to emphasize the voice, you can use an air horn. Get coyote! Beat it, coyote! Get coyote! Be loud. And then just wildly pretend like you're having a fit. Just, ah! Go coyote! Get coyote! So be loud and active.
Yeah. And these things will, seriously, coyotes will go, what's that? And they will learn. We have a video for you to watch. Thank you, Jack.
How much do you charge, Jack, for that service?
We have a video that was created by the city of Aurora, Colorado. And you'll see, it might seem weird at first, but they're trying to be weird and funny here. So, but they're trying to teach how to haze a coyote, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's see if we can get this to play. Okay.
Coyotes are all around us.
Not just in the wild, but also in neighborhoods, cities, and suburbs.
And even if you've never seen one, you should still know what to do just in case you come across one.
Don't know what to do? Welcome to our instructional video on how to haze a coyote. In this video, we're going to show you how to haze a coyote. Let's talk about what hazing is first. Hazing is a simple thing that you can do if you're suddenly approached by a coyote, or if you see one somewhere in an area where it doesn't belong. Hazing keeps your community safe and protects you and the animal from harm. Everybody wins.
When we think of coyotes, we tend to think of this, or even this. But coyotes are actually a bit more like this, and they're coming into contact with people in urban areas more and more, so it's important we know more about them.
Here are some coyote facts to consider. No matter how big you think a coyote looks, most coyotes actually weigh less than 45 pounds. They're mostly skin and fur and legs, and really very little actual coyote. What do coyotes eat? Human beings are rarely on a coyote's shopping list. They mostly like to eat fruits, insects, snakes, squirrels, mice, goose eggs, and other things that actually make them helpful to our ecosystem.
For the most part, coyotes avoid people. We're loud, stinky, and kind of scary. And in places where coyotes come into contact with humans all the time, they can get used to us and no longer see us as something to avoid.
And this is especially true for urban coyotes. Luckily, coyotes are generally trainable. And this is where you come in. Like it or not, you help train your local coyotes by how you interact with them every time you see them. So, what is hazing? I know what hazing is. We did it in my fraternity. All we need are some wigs, some lipstick, and a few goats.
No, not that kind of hazing.
Hello, I am the dog whisperer, Caesar Milan. We teach hazing to all of my clients at the Dog Psychology Center I have in Los Angeles, California.
Yeah, not quite. See, hazing is probably something you already know how to do. You probably use hazing techniques to keep your pet off the furniture or out of certain areas of your house.
Buster, what are you doing on that chair? Get off it there. Thank you. So what happens if you run into a coyote? Who does the hazing? A ranger? Well, that would be nice, but if you're in an urban area like a supermarket parking lot, there probably aren't going to be a whole lot of rangers around to help you. How about this person? Surely she can help.
All right, sweetie. Well, I just finished folding your underwear, and I packed you a PB&J with the crust cut off. Would you like me to go out and haze that coyote for you before you go?
Sorry, but Mom is not going to be able to help you either. How about a firefighter, or a policeman, or a superhero, or an astronaut? You get the idea by now. No one is going to haze a coyote for you. If you encounter a coyote, you're going to need to handle it yourself. But here's the good news. It's not that difficult. So, what does hazing look like? In order to understand what hazing is, let's first see some examples of what hazing is not. No, that's not hazing. Well, that's scary, but that's not hazing either.
Go away now. Go on. Go away.
No, that's not hazing either. Hey, it's a coyote! Hey, everybody, it's a coyote! Come here, come here, come here. No, that's not hazing either. In fact, that's just stupid. Go away, coyote! Go away! A talking shrub isn't hazing either. So running, hiding, or even trying to be friendly to the animal, these are all things that you should not do.
So, what does coyote hazing look like? Well, remember the acronym SMART. Stop, make, announce, repeat, and teach. Stop. Make yourself look big. Hey! Announce yourself. Hey, hey, hey! Repeat if necessary, and teach someone else in your community about coyote hazing.
If you have a pet with you, bring it closer to you, or if possible, into your arms. Next, what should I say when I haze? Remember, when it comes to hazing a coyote, it's not what you say, but how you say it.
You
Yes, that's fine, that will work. It might be a little R-rated, but it will get results, which is ultimately what you want.
Go on now. Shoot!
Once again, it's not what you say, but how you say it. Give it a little gusto.
Go on! Get out of here! Go!
That's more like it. Sure, whatever you say doesn't matter, so it can even be gibberish. The only thing that matters is that it's a human voice, it's forceful, and directed at the coyote. Many people ask, can I use objects when I'm hazing a coyote? Sure, there's a lot of things you can use to make yourself look larger or make more noise, such as a rake, a golf club, pennies in a can, an air horn, a stick, even a water gun would work. The things you don't want to use are things like food, a lemon meringue pie, steak, anything that might coax the coyote near you.
Just remember, the goal with hazing the coyote is not to harm it, but rather to teach it to avoid people and specific places.
Next, when should I haze? Hazing a coyote should take place anytime a coyote engages you, approaches you, or you see one where it doesn't belong, such as a backyard, a playground, or just strolling down the sidewalk in the middle of the day. So, what's your excuse for not hazing? Many people don't feel comfortable with the idea of hazing a coyote. Here are some common excuses, and reasons why you shouldn't make them. Well, I don't want to look like an idiot. Do you really want coyotes hanging around your house or your neighborhood? If not, you might want to be willing to look a little silly. Besides, it's only going to be for a few seconds.
What if it gets mad and comes after me?
Don't worry, it's only a 30-pound canine. You're probably going to be able to scare it off just fine. I don't know what to do! That's why we've made this video. This isn't something they teach you in school.
Well, I don't think it will work.
It will work. If you follow all the instructions we just gave you, you'll be fine.
The coyote is my totem animal, and so we're on a spiritual journey together, and I don't want to hurt the coyote's feelings.
Next, is there any time I shouldn't haze a coyote? This is actually a very good question. There is one exception. Never haze a coyote that is cornered, injured, or with pups. In these cases, simply make yourself look larger, maintain eye contact, and slowly back away. So now you know how to do this, and you're prepared. And you can also share this information with friends and family, so that they are also prepared.
So that's how you haze a coyote. Be smart.
Coyote Safety and Awareness Education is funded in part by Adams County.
There you have it. Okay, well that's, so just to reinforce, one of the things that they didn't cover fully that I want to say, you must make a connection with the coyote for hazing to work. You can't, as he showed from a bush, you can't haze from a car or a house. You can't paintball from behind a bush. The coyote has to see you. You have to make that direct eye contact so they associate the bad thing with you. You need to put yourself between the coyote and a pet or your child. You don't want them focusing on the pet or the child. You want them to see you as the big scary thing that's teaching them to stay away. And you must continue hazing till the coyote completely leaves the area. The biggest mistake people make is they go, "Get away, coyote!" and the coyote runs off, 20 yards, turns around and looks back and nothing happens, and then he thinks, okay, all I need to do is just run a little bit and I'm fine. You want to haze, you want to scare him, you want to go after him until he is off the property you don't want him on. And you must do that. He must completely leave the area. Best practices, there are a variety of methods and you need to use a variety of hazers. For example, if only one animal control officer in uniform comes out to haze the coyote might start seeing that person coming and going, okay, I got to get out of here now, but not associate it with a general deterrence in that particular area. So you want all the people in the community to do this at once. You don't want the coyote to recognize one person and get to know that they're the only ones they need to fear. You should only use noisemakers when you have a connection with the coyote. You don't want to forewarn them. For example, one person said, hazing's not working, and we said, well, what are you doing? And he said, well, shaking the penny jar every time I put my dog out. And we said, wait a minute. What you're doing is you're announcing that the dog is going out. It's kind of like a dinner bell, right? You want to only use that penny jar when you see the coyote and you want him to leave, not as a forewarning. Usually it only takes 2 to 3 times, sometimes once, till the coyote or family group learns, I got to get out of here. Doesn't take much. They are very smart. This is my supervisor who gave a talk on coyotes. This is Lindsay White-Dasher, and she gave a talk in Ohio, and she walked out of the meeting room where she'd given her talk, and there was a coyote standing there. And they said, that's a coyote that we can't get rid of. So in her high heels, she went flying out to haze the coyote. She said she nearly killed herself, tripping on the ground in her high heels, but she got him out of there. And somebody snapped this picture. So it can be done anywhere by anyone, is what I'm trying to say, in high heels. As they said, never haze a sick or injured coyote. Their behavior is unpredictable. You don't want to haze a cornered animal. They must need to be able to get away. And young children should be taught to call for help. We again, don't want them to run. Here's an example at Bible Park, Colorado. There were habituated coyotes in close proximity to people. This was a common sight. Coyote would come up to people picnicking, just lie down and watch them. They'd lounge in the park during the day. They would follow runners. And then it was fine. People didn't mind them until coyotes started attacking large dogs. Then they did mind them. So the park staff got together and they hazed the coyotes. It was a 2-week period, and they were hazed with a variety of tactics. And as a result of that, there were no more instances of dog attacks in the park, no more following people, and the aggressive behavior and stalking totally ceased. And interestingly, the coyotes are still present. None of them were removed, but they avoid people. And people, if you look in the circle, there is a coyote there. It's really hard to see. But coyotes are still present, but they're now being secretive and avoiding people. And interestingly, people are saying, where'd they go? And they blame the Bible Park staff for removing them, and they said, why'd you take them away? The Bible Park staff did nothing other than haze them, but because they changed their behavior, people now think that they're gone, and they're not. There was a neighborhood, I think this was Minnesota, a male resident attended a hazing training. He saw a coyote in his neighbor's yard, he hazed it. It took 3 times, the coyote never returned. So it really is something anybody can do. Here's a school, and I know schools are a prime concern. Obviously you don't want children coming into harm because of a coyote. This is the Bill Roberts Elementary School in Colorado. Coyotes were seen along the pathways to school in the morning, and they were outside the fence at recess when the kids were playing, which was alarming to a lot of people. They started a hazing program. The children were taught to recognize the coyotes. Literature was given to the school and the neighborhood on how to haze and what to do, and the neighborhood began hazing them, and there were no problems. Interestingly, the coyotes were viewing these children as a food source because kids were taking their lunches out at recess, eating and dropping food. So there were food scraps everywhere. The coyotes were being attracted to that. Not the children, but the food that the children were leaving behind. And then, the more they researched the issue, they found out that children were actually feeding the coyotes food from their lunch boxes through the fence. So there were things that the kids were doing that were bringing the coyotes in. And so they stopped that. They had the food only eaten inside, no lunch boxes were allowed outside, and the children were taught why feeding was wrong, wrong, wrong. And that, combined with the hazing, stopped the problem here. No coyotes had to be removed. So what do you do if you see a coyote? Remember, it's not abnormal for them to be out during the day. Put yourself between the coyote and your pet or your child and haze the coyote. I mean, just use your arms and your voice. And look for and eliminate anything that might be attracting them. And people don't think of birdseed as attracting coyotes, but it does, in compost piles. And just sort of chucking something out the back door rather than throwing it out and having it smell up your garbage. And when we tell people when you haze a coyote or you view a coyote that you don't want around, alert your neighbors and ask them to do it too. Get a community-wide effort, and these animals will really learn. So just to sum up, to prevent coyote conflicts, we have to change our behavior with attractants, pets, and children's behavior, and also change the coyote's behavior by hazing. It's a very effective tool, and it's one I hope you use here to resolve any issues that I'm not sure are problems yet, but you know, it's a great tool to have, and it empowers people. People in this community can take hazing, you know, and use it in their own backyards and see results, and it's very empowering. So everybody needs to work together and you'll have a good result. And I thank you. Here's a website for more information, and I'm happy to take any questions on coyotes or any other wildlife issues you might have. Yes.
You didn't mention this, so I'm going to kind of assume it's an old, it's a tale of some kind. But I was told that that my dog, I confess, will run loose in the woods behind the house sometimes. And they said that what the coyotes will do is they send one out to make friends with your dog. And so your dog gets to be friends with this one, and then one day they'll all come out and they'll lure this dog in, or the friend coyote will lure the dog into the back and they'll kill it.
Right.
Is it true?
I've heard that, and I've heard we attribute coyotes with a great deal of thinking and strategizing, and the question is, where is the proof that that occurs? I think it is sort of an old wives' tale, and it's sort of a theory that got out there, and people now believe it. But from what I understand, there is no proof whatsoever that coyotes are doing that. Coyotes are doing what they normally do, they sort of hunt singly. They don't hunt in packs here. They singly go after squirrels and rabbits and mice and rats. And if they see a small dog, they singly will attack that dog. There's no luring and pack
Well, like,
attack, yeah.
so when they're out and about, they're really just hunting. They're not looking to make friends with other
They're not
animals.
looking to make friends, but they are observing their landscape. They're seeing what goes on there. They're looking for easy prey. You know, the easier the prey, the more attractive to them. The easier the food source. If you're putting out pet food, why hunt? It's so easy to go up to that dog or cat bowl and just gobble up the food. So they're trying to conserve their resources. So luring, making friends with a dog, you know, this whole grand strategy is a lot of work. It requires a pack mentality that they don't have. And I think it's really a fabrication that we've put together to explain what they do. But there's no basis for it. So, yeah, I wouldn't put much
Thank
stock
you.
in that. Yes?
Compost piles, any recommendations? I mean, if you just do dirt, okay, we use the compost pile with vegetable scraps and things. I mean, gardening, you know, tomato plants and stuff. We're not tomato plants, that's pretty easy. But vegetation, vegetable manure, can you just throw dirt on it? Would that
Throw a
distract
lot
them?
of dirt on
Does their
it,
sense
yeah.
of smell so good that
Their sense of smell is great. Contained compost piles are the best. The barrel ones are the best. No meat scraps. Meat scraps are just calling them in. But the more you can do to cover it, you know, with the dirt and just make sure it stays vegetable matter, that still might attract them if they're real hungry. But meat is the priority. Meat and berries and, you know, so vegetable matter is lower on the list. So I just keep putting the dirt on and you should be fine.
no, we're pretty sure that they were eating our, was it Korean dogwood?
Oh, yeah.
Berries,
Fruits,
fruits
yeah.
from the Korean dogwood.
They do love fruit, and they will go after fruit, particularly fallen fruit that's taken a while to rot a little. It's very sweet, and they love fruit. And people don't realize that. They think of these animals as carnivores, but they're very optimistic. And
Some of
they
that
will-
yipping might be eating the fermented.
Who knows? Who knows? They might be having a jolly good time. But yeah, fruit trees especially, we just tell people, you know, collect the fruit at the bottom, don't let it sit, because that will attract them, unless you don't mind them being there, which a lot of people don't mind. So but that's a big caller for them.
What really works is we found out, just running out screaming,
Yeah.
jumping up and down.
Right.
We saw them one day chasing, 3 or 4 deer, and we ran out and we screamed and howled. Of course, we chased the deer too.
Right.
But they did,
But they turn and run.
They turn and ran.
Right, yeah, they're gonna run, because anything that looks threatening, they're calculating, is it worth it? Is this risky? They want to stay safe, and particularly they want their pups to stay safe, so anything that's at all threatening, they just say, it's not worth it. They're not fighters. You don't have issues with coyotes coming at people and fighting with them and attacking them viciously. The few attacks that we've seen have usually been rabid animals, and you know, their brain is impacted by the virus. They're just not a normal, healthy animal. A normal, healthy animal, you come running at them, they're going to go the other way. Yes?
That was a really excellent presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
On my street, we're on a small dead-end street in Haddam, and there are some elementary school children who wait at the end of the street for the bus. And we have had coyotes in the neighborhood lately, and so the parents are waiting at the bus stop. I think if I tell them what you told us about teaching the kids how to haze them,
Yeah.
they should feel comfortable leaving the kids at the bus stop. Do you agree?
I would think they would. I mean, you know, my concern with kids at a bus stop is more related to the human element of, you know, but in terms of coyotes, coyotes are just, a healthy coyote is not going to come up and attack kids waiting at a bus stop. If they're curious and they're walking by and the kids all get big and yell and, you know, coyote is just going to be out of there. There's no food there. They're food motivated. And
Well, actually,
that's
they
not
all have
food.
lunch boxes.
Yeah, they all have lunch boxes, but they're contained. What was
Yeah.
the problem at that school I showed you is the kids were eating and then throwing food on the ground that wasn't contained and feeding through the fence. But food contained in lunch boxes, that's not enough to bring out a coyote. They want easy stuff. Yes?
Do they have any predators locally?
Aside from cars, no. They really, cars and people are the main predators, but nothing else. They are a top predator here.
One thing I've heard, I just want to mention is, you know, when they make that yipping sound, that can be one coyote and it can sound like
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4, and people say there's like a whole bunch of coyotes
Right.
down in the woods there, and it could be 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Right, that's a
Yeah.
really good point you mentioned, which I meant to mention, thank you, is sometimes when they start to vocalize, it sounds like, and I've heard it and thought, oh my gosh, there's 50 of them.
Yeah.
It could be 2, it could be 4. And the other thing is sometimes people will see a coyote or 2 go through their yard, and other people see the coyotes, and they imagine there's now a pack of 20, where it's the same 2 coyotes going from yard to yard. So people's perception of coyotes is very different from their reality. And you're right, that yipping, it's got so many intonations that it can sound like a chorus of many, and it can be very few. So it's a beautiful sound. It's very orchestral.
My dogs joined in the other night. when
The dogs joined in.
They did. I've never heard my dogs howl before in my life. And the coyotes were howling outside and they were inside and they joined right in.
You should take it. What a great music to play. It's amazing, yes.
How do you haze if there's more than one?
Usually you won't have more than one, but what you'll do is you pick your one, pick whichever one you want to go after. It's usually 1, maybe 2. You're not going to have more than that. And you just go pick one and just go after him screaming and yelling, and when he starts to run, go after the other. Both will run off together, and you just keep going till you hit the property line that you don't care that they can be on. You get them off your property entirely and you keep going. Now, pups are a different story. When people have pups, like my brother called me, they're all around my swimming pool, what do? They're going to play, they're going to be near the den, no point in hazing them. They are playing for 2 weeks, and they're going to be out without the parents, they're going to run around like puppies. Our big challenge there is to keep kids from trying to go pat them. And it's just, hazing won't work because they're naive. They're learning. They haven't been taught by their parents to avoid people. They haven't been taught to hunt. They're just, they're going through that 2-week period where they're left behind. In that case, you really just have to tolerate them. You can go outside and clap your hands and yell at them to get them to go back closer to the den. You can do that, and they'll be scared of you because they don't know what a person is. So that's sort of mini hazing, but you can't get them to leave the area because they have to stay near the den. It's the only home they have. Yes?
What does a den look like?
A den is usually, coyotes can dig out a den. They usually use a fox or woodchuck burrow. It's just like a hole in the ground. It's usually under a tree because they'll use sort of the tree roots for reinforcement. It can be very low, they can sometimes, but it'll be an opening in the ground that they can get in under, and it will lead to sort of a den cavity. And sometimes it's an old woodchuck burrow. It's a sort of a hole in the ground near trees that has an opening and an exit and a shallow burrow system, and they'll use that. So if you've had woodchucks and the woodchucks are gone, foxes and coyotes sometimes move right in.
Rock ledges?
Yeah, rock ledges, anywhere they can have sort of this cavity, a protected cavity. And sometimes it's a low cavity, like the opening they have to kind of slither in. And sometimes it's hard to even find, but it's someplace where they can get away, a cavity they can get away. It's always on the ground. Sometimes it's a hollow log, not always. That's usually not private enough. They like a very private, secure den. And the other thing we've done, if you need them to leave the den, this talk didn't talk about it because we encourage you to let them stay. If you absolutely need them to leave the den because your dogs are going after them, what we've done, we've had people put a radio at the den playing rap music, something annoying. We've had people throw in dirty, smelly socks after they go to the gym. And sometimes we've even told people to put up these balloons like SpongeBob with the big eyes, the big face, and take the balloon, Mylar balloon, and put it right outside the den, secured to rocks so it bobs around. And the harassment, it's this weird looking thing bobbing around, it smells bad, sounds bad, you just sort of, it's a multi-sensory deterrent that will get them to move to another den. So if you need to do that, that's a way to get them to take their pups and move somewhere else. But we kind of encourage you not to do that because it's usually not necessary. They're just there, they're living there. It's a lot more fun for the family to just watch them and learn about them. It's really a rare treat. So we tell people, this is a great thing, enjoy it, don't make them move. But if you have to, that's the way to do it.
And fill it in for next year.
And then next year, if you don't want them yet, you need to not only fill it in, but maybe sort of put mesh over it so they can't just dig it right out again. Yeah.
We had some suggestions given to the town hall of urine will scare them away. Is there anything that people could do in their yards to keep them away other than the hazing?
Right. Urine does not work. Urine, if anything, there's a lot of people out there that will tell you to get this bobcat or fox urine. It turns out these urines are really, we don't know what they are. They may be dog urine. They may be fox urine from fur farms. We're not sure they're urine at all. But you know, there's a lot of questions about the integrity of these products. But if anything, they attract coyotes. Because think about it, when a dog urinates somewhere, you know, or a fox, a coyote's going to come along, and that's the language they speak in. They're going to smell it and be interested. Who's this? So any urines are going to bring them in, if anything. But what we tell people to do, if you really don't want them there, you can take rags, soak them in ammonia. You can put these SpongeBob and crazy balloons with big eyes around. And really, if they're not going to stick around for long, if there's no food and no place to den, that's what they want. So if there's a den site you don't want them in, fill it in. Make sure they're not in there first, or make sure nobody's in there, no woodchucks, no anybody. You can fill it with straw first or newspaper and watch it for 2 to 3 nights. And if the newspaper stays in place, then nobody's coming and going. Then you can fill it in. But you know, short of food and den sites, they're not going to stick around for long anyway. So there aren't many other deterrents. Smell-related things tend to attract them more than anything, unless it's something noxious like ammonia. Anything else? Yes?
Is the DEP relocating any coyotes at this point in the state?
DEP is not supporting relocating coyotes, primarily because it ends up killing the coyotes, and you know, where there's coyote habitat, you tend to have coyotes, and so they are not supportive of people trying to resolve problems that way. Plus, if you relocate coyotes, others can just move into that vacated niche, so it's not really solving a problem.
So if somebody calls the DEP here for problems, what are they likely to say and do about it?
They're likely to refer you to their website and to make many of the suggestions I've made about removing attractants and trying to haze them, and you know, only if it's a severe problem would they recommend somebody coming out to remove them. But they would try to get you to deal with the problem at its source. You can go, they have an info page on living with coyotes. If you Google DEEP coyotes, you'll find their info page, which makes many of these same suggestions. They don't go into hazing as much. I don't think they've worked with hazing that much.
We got a lot of calls this year on foxes. And the people actually liked the foxes on their property, and you know, they didn't want them hurt. They just thought that, well, maybe they don't have moms or, you know, parents. But I said, I gave them a few tips and call us back if anything, you know, doesn't work. But I think basically they were just like you said, the foxes were doing the same thing as the coyotes. You know, their parents had left them, and they were just kind of feeling their way around. But everything turned out good. There were a lot of good, positive fox calls this year. I really felt good about it.
Yeah. Well, people are usually scared of foxes the same way they are of coyotes, that they think that foxes are going to do harm to their children, drag them off, you know, and we explain, you know, foxes are looking for mice. The weirdest call we got this year was a guy had foxes he was terrified of, and I explained to him how they're good for the ecology and they're not going to harm his kids, and then he said, okay, fine, got it. And then I called him back and said, how you doing? He goes, great. He goes, we're feeding them. He goes, they were messing up the neighborhood. I said, what do you mean messing up? He said, they were leaving carcasses around. But the father would bring carcasses for the young and dump it outside the den, which happened to be under a shed. And what he thought of was that this was messy. So he was taking the carcasses away and then putting back cranberry bread for them to eat. And so he'd been feeding them cranberry bread, and so I said, sir, you realize this is total malnutrition for these poor creatures. They're supposed to eat meat, protein, and you're giving them cranberry bread and taking away the food that their father has so, heartily earned for them. So we got him to stop doing that, but in his mind it was cleaning up the neighborhood, keeping things tidy, and he was feeding them, but he was feeding them everything wrong and not letting the parents do their job. But I think a lot of coyotes don't always live as closely with people as foxes. They're a little more wary. Foxes will put their den right under your stoop or your shed, and that's just what suburban, urban foxes are doing. And there's nothing wrong with it. And if you don't want it, again, you can haze foxes. But, we tell people enjoy them. It's a rare treat.
I'd be afraid my dogs would hurt them.
Yeah, sometimes,
The babies.
but see, foxes and coyotes have such a keen sense of smell that when your dog comes out the door, they know it. They smell it, they know where he is, and they're out there. So not likely your dog will get to do harm. But it is, certainly something you don't want to risk. Any other questions about foxes, coyotes, or any other wildlife issue?
Mountain lions.
What is that?
Are they here? Mountain lions.
Mountain lions.
Are they here?
Litchfield County, we have a number of them because celebrities keep bringing them in on the internet. I think the DEP is saying we've had a few come through hitching rides on trucks. They don't know where that last one came from, but they're not resident here. I mean, it's a weird event when they come. They've come somehow, but they're not, they're not living here, so we don't need to be worried. But some of these habituated coyotes that we're seeing in Litchfield and other leopards and other animals, I mean, we're cutting down on the exotic trade in wildlife, but till then, people are still buying them on the internet, so we'll have a few sightings here and there, but nothing to be worried about. So any other questions?
Bears.
Oh, yes?
No, I was going to say, to add to a wonderful presentation, it would be great to have a coyote, the sound of them on tape.
Oh, yes, yes. It is, and it's a wonderful, I think, actually Paul Winter, the musician, does a lot of music with coyotes.
Who is that?
Paul Winter does a lot of musical arrangements with coyotes, but yeah, you can hear them, and in certain places when they start howling, and it's just an amazing thing. It's amazing. It's really something to be in awe of. It's a great sound. So I hope, in a way, I hope you get to hear more coyotes here in Haddam, dare I say. And did you have a question?
I was wondering why I don't see bears.
Bears are here. They come through. What we're tending to see are more yearling bears that are passing through. They are not staying here because the habitat here is too developed for them, but they are passing through, and every now and then we hear about a bear. But bears can be incredibly secretive, and if you ever go to Yellowstone Park, the campgrounds, I remember we were there, and I remember going there and looking around thinking, wow, there's so many bears around, but how come they're not in the park, in the camping areas? And then I remember we were walking around, it was just getting dark, and I saw these shapes going near the garbage cans, and we put our flashlight on, and there were 5 bears in the garbage cans, and there were maybe 80 people in that area. Nobody knew they were there. They were just going in the garbage cans, taking out stuff, and leaving. And they were right among the people, but it was dark, and people sort of were just talking to each other. Nobody knew they were there. So I think these animals are around, but they're being very secretive, and they're here. There's bears here in Canada. But you may never get to see them because they're knowing how to behave. As long as we don't keep out food for them, that should stay, hopefully. Yes?
What kind of bears?
Black bears. We don't have grizzlies here. They're all black bears. And there have been some newspaper articles about bears passing through, and I get phone calls about bears, but usually they're seen at garbage cans and then they move on. But they're definitely here. You have resident bears here in Haddam. But it's just a good thing. Any other questions? Couldn't have answered all of them. Any other wildlife issues or concerns? Or
Well, thank
is
you.
everybody good?
It was a great presentation.
Thank you.